I felt the cold before I felt the fear. The kitchen tile pressed against my cheek like a slab of ice, numbing one side of my face, while the rest of my body burned from the inside out. My breaths came in thin, ragged pulls, each one sharper than the last, like my lungs were being carved open. I tried to push myself up, but my arms buckled, trembling so violently that I crashed back onto the floor. My vision pulsed in and out, shrinking at the edges as if someone were slowly dimming the world around me. Somewhere near my hand, my phone vibrated its screen, glowing weakly in the dim kitchen light. I dragged my fingers across the tile, each movement sending another bolt of agony through my abdomen. It felt like something inside me was ripping, tearing open in a way that could not be undone. I swallowed a cry, but the sound still slipped out small and broken. My fingertips finally brushed the edge of my phone. I curled my hand around it, pulling it toward me inch by inch. The effort made black dots swarm across my vision. When the screen lit up, I saw a notification from my mother, a live stream link to my sister Vanessa's charity gala. I must have tapped it earlier without noticing. Now it played at full volume because my phone's sound settings were unpredictable at the best of times. Music flooded the kitchen. Laughter. Applause. The clinking of champagne glasses. Vanessa stood at the center of the room on stage in a shimmering gown, smiling that polished smile she had perfected since we were children. I stared at the image through the haze of my pain, then forced my thumb toward the call icon. The phone rang, echoing in my ears. My mother answered with a sigh already loaded with irritation. "What is it now? I told you earlier we cannot handle this tonight. Not on Vanessa's night. Mom, something is wrong. I cannot breathe right. My stomach, it hurts so bad. Please." There was a pause filled only by the sound of people laughing behind her. Then her voice dropped lower and sharper. "Do not start again. Tonight is your sister's night. Do not ruin this for her." I gasped as another wave of pain tore through me. She heard it but did not soften. "Take something for your stomach and lie down. I have to go." The call ended. The live stream kept playing, filling the room with celebration I could not see clearly anymore. I dialed my father with shaking fingers. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried again. Voicemail! My hand trembled harder as I searched for Vanessa's contact. She answered on the first ring, her voice crisp, bright, and impatient. "I am literally backstage. Make it quick. Nessa, I need help. Something is wrong. Please." She exhaled loudly in a way that told me exactly what she thought of my words. "You need attention. That is what you need. You always do this when something is about me." I doubled over as a violent spasm racked my abdomen. I tried to speak, but nothing coherent came out. Vanessa's voice sharpened even more. "Get therapy. Not attention. I am hanging up." The phone slipped from my hand. A moment later, a surge of nausea hit me so hard that I turned my head just in time to vomit onto the floor. My body shook uncontrollably. Every breath felt shorter than the one before it. I tried to inhale fully, but the air caught somewhere high in my chest, refusing to reach my lungs. The room tilted as if the floor had shifted beneath me. I forced my palm against the tile, pushing myself an inch toward the door, then another inch. The movement sent another tearing sensation through my abdomen. I cried out again, but the sound was thin and weak. A pot I had left near the counter earlier fell and clattered loudly onto the tile. The noise echoed through the apartment. Somewhere beyond my door, I heard footsteps stop. A voice called out muffled but clear enough. "Are you all right in there?" "Hello." I tried to answer. Nothing came out but a rasp of air. The footsteps faded, and for a moment I thought they were leaving. My heart pounded wildly with fear. Then the footsteps returned quickly now, heavier, more urgent. The same voice called again, louder this time. "I am calling 911. Relief washed over me, but it mixed with a cold dread settling deeper beneath my ribs. My limbs felt too heavy, my body too distant. I closed my eyes for a second because I could not hold them open anymore. Sirens arrived what felt like seconds later, though time had become slippery and strange. I heard pounding on the door, followed by the violent crack of splintering wood. I forced my eyes open just enough to see shapes entering the room, uniforms moving quickly. Gloved hands reaching for me. Voices overlapped around me. "We have a female down." "She is pale." "Check her pulse." "Her abdomen is rigid." Suspected internal bleed. I felt their hands lift my head gently, then shift my body. Someone placed an oxygen mask over my face. The cool rush of air hit my lungs sharply. "Stay with me. Can you hear me?" Another voice shouted toward the doorway. "We need to transport now. She is going into hemorrhagic shock." They lifted me onto the stretcher. My phone slid across the floor, the live stream still playing. Music. Applause. My mother's laugh echoed faintly from the speakers at the exact moment a paramedic read my dropping blood pressure numbers out loud. As they carried me to the ambulance, I stared at the ceiling lights rushing above me. My heart pounded, then stumbled. My hearing faded until only one voice cut through the blur as a paramedic leaned close to my ear. "Stay with me, sweetheart. Do not leave us now." The world dissolved into white. The day had begun so quietly that it almost felt staged, as if life wanted to lull me into a false sense of normal before tearing the floor out from under me. I woke to pale morning light filtering through the blinds, the kind that usually made me linger in bed for a few minutes before starting the day. The ache in my stomach was there immediately, a dull pressure sitting low and heavy, but not sharp enough to alarm me. I had felt worse pains before. Stress often knotted my stomach, especially after long weeks teaching and juggling administrative demands no one warned me about when I chose this career. I sat up slowly, pressing my palm to my abdomen. It felt tight, but manageable. I told myself it was nothing. I had a lesson to finalize, a classroom to prepare, and an entire schedule packed with small responsibilities that depended on me showing up. That is what I always did. I got ready. I brewed coffee, though the smell made my stomach twist unpleasantly. I took 2 sips before pouring the rest down the sink. I skipped breakfast, blaming stress again. I told myself I would feel better once I was distracted. On the drive to school, the ache sharpened a little every time I hit a bump in the road. Still, I kept going. My family had trained me well. Push through it. Do not complain. Do not be dramatic. I repeated those silent rules the whole way to the building. I greeted my students, wrote the day's agenda on the board, reviewed a stack of essays, and tried not to wince whenever the pain pulsed across my abdomen in slow, dragging waves. By mid-morning, the ache had become a tightness that made it harder to stand up straight. I leaned against my desk more often than I should have. One of my students asked if I was all right, and I waved it off, blaming a poor night's sleep. I told myself it would pass. By noon, I could barely convince myself of that lie. I sat in my car during lunch break, gripping the steering wheel with both hands as the pain burned hotter. Sweat gathered at my hairline, even though the air was cool. I could feel something shifting inside me, something that felt nothing like stress and everything like danger. For the first time that day, fear crept in. I called my mother. The moment she answered, I heard the excitement in her voice, the fast, clipped tone she always used when preparing for something important. She was fussing over last-minute details for Vanessa's gala, making sure every flower arrangement matched the exact shade of ivory her eldest daughter demanded. When I tried to tell her that I felt sick, she laughed softly. "A real bellyache or one of your overreactions?" Her words stung, even though I had expected them. "Mom, it is bad. I cannot explain it. Something feels wrong." She sighed dramatically in the way only she could. "Do not ruin today. Vanessa has worked for months on this. Please, for once, do not make things about you." It was a familiar script. Since childhood, everything important belonged to Vanessa. Her recitals, her debate tournaments, her scholarship dinners. My job was to stay out of the way and never create complications. Whenever I did fall ill as a child, the response was always the same. "You are too sensitive. You exaggerate. You make small problems big." I internalized those lines so deeply that I could not tell the difference anymore between genuine pain and the kind of discomfort I was supposed to ignore. I ended the call with my mother and sat in the parking lot for a long minute, trying to breathe through the tightening grip inside my abdomen. I should have gone to the hospital then. I know that now, but decades of training do not unravel in a single afternoon. I convinced myself to finish the day. I convinced myself I would feel better after resting. I convinced myself I was being dramatic. By the time classes ended, the tightness had become a sharp stab that made me double over when I reached my car. I leaned against the door, swallowing back a wave of nausea. The world around me felt too bright, the sounds too sharp. Still, I drove home, gripping the steering wheel as if holding it tightly enough could anchor me to consciousness. The pain flared so intensely during the ride that I had to pull over twice just to catch my breath. Each time I leaned forward over the steering wheel, with my forehead pressed against it, breathing in shallow, broken gasps. When I finally reached my apartment complex, I sat in the car for several minutes, unable to convince my body to move. The throbbing had become relentless. A strange heaviness settled across my lower abdomen, a sensation I had never felt before. I knew something was wrong. Truly wrong. I dialed my mother again. I barely managed to say hello before she sighed. "If this is about your stomach, I told you to take something. Vanessa is already stressed. Do not add to it." "Mom, please. I think I need a doctor." She paused, not in concern but in annoyance. "We are heading to the venue. I cannot deal with this. Do not ruin this evening." I ended the call without responding. I stared at the phone while the pain throbbed steadily, each pulse stronger than the last. It would have been smart to dial 911 then. Instead, I stepped out of the car, forcing myself upright even as the world tilted. The walk from the parking lot to my door felt impossibly long. I had to brace myself on the railing twice, and once I nearly dropped to my knees when a sharp spike of pain drove through my abdomen like a burning screw, turning deeper. By the time I reached my kitchen, my hands were shaking uncontrollably. I tried to drink water, but the moment the glass touched my mouth, nausea surged like a wave crashing upward. I stumbled. My hand slipped. The glass shattered on the tile. My body folded forward before I could catch myself. Pain tore through me so violently that the air vanished from my lungs. For a brief moment, everything froze. Then the world narrowed to nothing but the cold tile beneath my cheek, and the dizzying realization that something inside me had finally crossed a line there was no coming back from. I lay there thinking it would pass. It did not. It only got worse. If I had understood then how close I already was to dying, I would have called for help sooner, but I had spent a lifetime being told I was dramatic. So I believed them. And because I believed them, the day that began with a simple ache became the night I almost never came back from. The moment my knees hit the kitchen floor, I knew something had gone terribly wrong, far beyond anything I could rationalize or explain away. The pain that ripped through my abdomen was nothing like the dull ache from earlier or the sharp pulses I had forced myself to ignore throughout the day. This was different. This was consuming. It wrapped around my middle like a tightening band, squeezing harder with every shallow breath I tried to take. I clutched my stomach instinctively, but even the pressure of my own hand made the pain flare so violently that my vision fragmented into shooting white lines. I tried to inhale again and felt the air catch halfway, sticking somewhere high in my chest. Panic washed over me in a cold wave. I rolled onto my side, gasping, trying to keep my eyes open as the room tilted and blurred. The kitchen lights above me flickered. Or maybe my vision was flickering. It was impossible to tell. I reached blindly for the counter, trying to pull myself upright, but my arm buckled under my weight. My palm slapped the tile uselessly. My body felt too heavy to lift, as if gravity had doubled its force in a single instant. My phone buzzed somewhere near me, its vibration rattling faintly against the floor. For a moment, I thought it might be my mother calling back, finally concerned enough to check on me. When I focused on the screen, all I saw was the Gala livestream continuing to play. Vanessa twirled in her dress as applause echoed through the ballroom. The cheering overlapped with the pounding in my ears. I squeezed my eyes shut. The pain twisted deeper, climbing up into my ribcage and radiating down into my legs. A hot nausea surged in my throat, and I forced myself onto my hands and knees, trying to breathe through it. My arms trembled so fiercely that my elbows nearly gave out. I swallowed hard, fighting the urge to throw up again. Cold sweat dripped from my forehead and soaked into the floor beneath me. I fumbled for my phone with shaking fingers. I tried calling Vanessa again, even though I knew exactly how she would respond. The call rang twice before she answered in a whisper. What? I could hear murmuring behind her, the rustling sound of someone adjusting her dress or microphone. Vanessa, please. I am on the floor. I cannot breathe. Something is wrong. There was a pause, a cold, silent pause, where I thought she might finally hear the fear in my voice. Instead, she exhaled sharply. You always do this. Always. The second something big happens for me, you find a way to make yourself the center. I wanted to scream that I was not doing any of this on purpose. I wanted to tell her I felt like I was dying, but the pain clenched so tightly that all I could manage was a broken sound that barely formed a word. She spoke again, her voice dripping frustration. Get help if you need help, but stop calling me. Then the line went dead. I stared at the screen until it blurred into an indistinguishable glow. My stomach tightened again, a deep twisting sensation that made the edges of my vision flare black. I reached for the refrigerator handle, hoping to pull myself upright. Instead, my grip slipped and I collapsed onto my side with a thud so loud it startled me. The fall sent another violent shockwave through my abdomen. I gasped, curled in on myself, clutching my stomach as tears streamed down my cheeks. My breathing became shallow, rapid, irregular. I tried to suck in deeper air, but it felt like my lungs had shrunk to half their size. Every inhale burned, every exhale wavered. I forced myself onto my elbows, trying to crawl toward the door. If I could get outside, maybe someone would see me. Maybe my neighbor would hear me. But my arms shook too violently to hold my weight. My left elbow buckled and my cheek smacked the tile. The cold felt sharper now. I blinked through the dizziness, trying to steady my gaze long enough to read the screen of my phone again. I tapped 911, but my finger slipped and smeared across the glass. I tried again. This time, it dialed. The ringing barely registered before the pain surged again. When the operator answered, her voice felt distant, muffled, as if coming through a tunnel. I tried to speak my address, but the words tangled together. I managed to choke out my street name, but the number dissolved on my tongue. Please, help! My voice broke. I am not sure how much she understood before my grip on the phone loosened and it slid out of reach. I reached for it again, but my hand would not move. My fingers twitched uselessly. The room tilted sharply and my head fell back onto the floor. My breathing grew faster, more desperate. The pressure in my abdomen reached a horrifying new intensity, like something inside me was swelling, pushing outward, ready to burst. Sweat rolled down my temples. My lips felt numb. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears, erratic and uneven. I tried once more to push myself upright. My arms gave out completely this time. I slumped onto the floor, lying flat on my side as the room darkened again. For a moment, there was nothing but the sound of the Gala still playing across the floor, tinny and distorted. Laughter, music, champagne glasses clinking. My family celebrating while I lay dying alone on the kitchen tile. The contrast was so surreal that a strange calm settled over me for a moment, as if my mind could not process both realities simultaneously. Then that moment vanished as another violent spasm ripped through me. I cried out, the noise barely audible. My vision collapsed inward like a closing curtain. Somewhere outside my door, I heard distant footsteps. A voice, faint, questioning. Then the world tilted again, swallowing everything in a wave of black. I drifted in and out of consciousness, caught between darkness and the distant echo of footsteps just outside my apartment door. The world felt distorted, as if every sound reached me through a thick, suffocating fog. I heard a hesitant knock, then a muffled voice calling out, asking if I was all right. I wanted to answer, to force out any sound that would tell them I was still here, still fighting, but my throat only produced a weak rasp that never reached the door. The footsteps faded for a moment, and terror surged through me so sharply that it momentarily cut through the haze. They were leaving. They had not heard me. My hand twitched toward the door, even though I could barely lift it from the floor. Then the footsteps returned, quicker and more purposeful this time, followed by a voice louder and edged with concern. "I am calling 911. Relief washed over me in a fragile wave. My breaths came faster, shallow, and uneven, as if my body had suddenly remembered how close it was to giving out. The room darkened at the edges again. Sirens arrived minutes later, though it felt like both an instant and an eternity. The distant wail grew closer until it vibrated faintly through the floor beneath me. My vision blurred as the pounding on my door began, each hit making the room shake. When no one answered, the pounding intensified. Then came the crack of splintering wood as the paramedics forced their way inside. Their voices filled the apartment immediately, sharp, urgent, overlapping. Female early 30s down on the kitchen floor. Pale. Labored breathing. Check responsiveness. Hands touched me gently but firmly, turning my body so they could see me better. One paramedic pressed fingers against my neck, searching for a pulse. Another lifted my eyelid, shining a small light that felt far too bright. I tried to speak, but the words dissolved into a weak, broken gasp. I heard one of them say, "Her abdomen is rigid. Severe tenderness. Possible internal hemorrhage. We need vitals now." A cold rush of fear tightened around my ribs. Internal bleeding. The words echoed inside my head like distant thunder. Someone slid an oxygen mask over my face, and I felt cool air press into my lungs. I tried to inhale deeper, but the pain twisted again so sharp it nearly folded me in half. "Easy. Breathe slow. Stay with us," one of them murmured near my ear. I felt gloved hands lift my head slightly as they secured the mask. Another pair of hands lifted my shirt enough to check for bruising or swelling. I heard the intake of breath from one of them when they pressed gently into my abdomen. "She is guarding. Extreme pain response. We need to move." My neighbor hovered near the doorway, his voice thick with worry as he explained he had heard something fall and thought it might be nothing until it happened again. I tried to turn my head toward him to say thank you, but a new wave of dizziness rolled over me, dragging my thoughts back into a fog. As they positioned the stretcher beside me, I caught a faint sound coming from my phone. The Gala live stream was still playing, though now the audio was warped and tinny, echoing against the tile. Laughter. Applause. Vanessa's voice floating above it all like a reminder of everything they had chosen instead of me. I closed my eyes, trying not to hear it, but the sound seeped into the edges of my consciousness like poison. When they lifted me onto the stretcher, the movement sent another violent jolt of pain through my abdomen. I cried out, my voice barely more than a whisper. My hand reached instinctively for something. Anything but the air slipped between my fingers. "Keep her steady. Watch her pressure. Her heart rate is climbing." They wheeled me through the broken doorway and down the hall, the bright overhead lights becoming streaks of white as my vision pulsed. Someone adjusted the oxygen mask, another fastened a strap across my chest. I heard one of them say, "She is slipping. Let's go." The cold night air hit my skin as they rushed me toward the ambulance. I shivered, partly from shock, partly from the overwhelming sense that I was hanging on by a thread. Inside the ambulance, the paramedics worked quickly. One inserted an IV into my arm, his movements swift and controlled. Another attached monitors to my chest, the beeping sounds filling the small space with relentless urgency. "Blood pressure is dropping fast. We need fluids wide open. Get a line in the other arm." I felt a prick, a tug, then the sensation of fluid flushing through my veins that made my whole body feel momentarily heavy. Somewhere above me, a paramedic leaned closer. "Can you hear me? Stay with us. You are doing good. Just keep breathing." I tried to nod, but even the attempt made the room tilt. My heart fluttered in an irregular rhythm. My skin felt cold and damp. I saw my reflection briefly in the glossy metal of a cabinet door. My face was pale, my lips nearly colorless. I barely recognized myself. "We are losing her pressure. Move, move, move." Someone adjusted the stretcher while another paramedic gripped my hand, grounding me, keeping me tethered to the present. The world flickered as the ambulance lurched forward. Lights flashed against the windows as the sirens wailed above us. My hearing dimmed, then sharpened again in bursts. Voices blurred, but I caught fragments. "Unknown onset. Severe abdominal pain. Suspected rupture. Notify trauma team. ETA 3 minutes. 3 minutes. I wondered if I had 3 minutes left in me. My eyes slid closed, too heavy to keep open. The darkness crept in slowly, curling around the edges of my mind. The paramedic near my head tapped my cheek lightly. "Hey, stay awake. Stay with me. Look at me." But my body was giving up, sinking deeper, shutting down inch by inch. As the ambulance sped through traffic, I heard one last thing, softer than the siren, yet sharper than the fear spiraling through me. A paramedic whispered beside me, as if speaking directly to whatever part of me was still fighting. "You are not dying today, not if we can help it." The darkness finally swept over me, quiet and complete. I drifted into a hazy half-consciousness as the ambulance doors burst open and a rush of cold air swept over me, mixing with the sterile hospital scent that followed. Voices echoed all around, rapid and clipped, as hands guided the stretcher through bright hallways that blurred into streaks of white and silver. I could not move my head, but I felt every jolt, every turn, every urgent shift. Somewhere above me, a female voice called out vitals, her tone steady but tense. Blood pressure dropping. Pulse unstable, possible rupture. The words washed over me like distant waves, disconnected from the reality that they were talking about me, about my failing body. Another voice joined in. "Trauma 1 is ready. Prep for immediate surgery." My stretcher rolled to a halt under harsh operating room lights. Their brightness stabbed through the thin veil of my consciousness, forcing my eyes half open. Shapes moved around me. Surgeons and nurses in scrubs, masks, hiding everything except their focused eyes. I tried to speak, but nothing more than a dry whisper escaped my throat. A man in a surgical cap leaned over me. His eyes were calm in a way that felt almost out of place compared to the frantic energy of the room. "I am Dr. Ellison. You are losing a significant amount of blood internally. We need to operate right now. If we do not, you will not survive." The words hung in the air, heavy and terrifying. I wanted to respond, to ask what was happening, to beg him to wait, but another wave of pain tore through my abdomen, leaving me breathless. I felt myself slipping again. A nurse inserted another IV, her hands moving quickly but gently. We tried contacting her family. No response. My heart clenched at the words, even though I already knew the truth. They had chosen not to answer. Chosen not to come. Chosen the Gala over me. It was almost surreal hearing it confirmed in a room full of strangers fighting to keep me alive. The monitors beside me beeped erratically, blood pressure falling fast. "She is crashing." I felt my body sinking deeper into the table, as if gravity itself were trying to pull me under. The nurse placed a breathing mask over my face, her eyes full of urgency as she held it firmly to create a seal. "I am giving you oxygen. Stay with us. You are doing great." I forced a shallow inhale, but the mask fogged instantly with my unsteady breath. Someone lifted my arm, securing it to the board. Another nurse placed pads on my chest. I heard the anesthesiologist directly behind me. "Starting induction. Count back from 10. The room blurred as the medication rushed through my veins like ice water. I managed to whisper one word. "Please." I did not even know what I was begging for. Help. Life. Forgiveness for calling my mother before calling 911. Forgiveness for still wishing she would walk through the doors. 10, 9. The world wavered and flickered. 8, 7. The beeping grew more urgent. "Her pressure is crashing. Doctor, we are losing her." 6. A loud alarm broke through the room. Someone shouted orders I could not understand. 5, 4. The edges of my vision collapsed inward. I felt weightless, detached, like my body was sliding away from me. 3, 2. The lights dimmed into a single glowing halo. Then nothing, a void, a strange quiet. But the quiet did not last. Through the darkness came a faint pull, a sensation like being tugged back toward the surface from somewhere underwater. Voices seeped in slowly. I felt pressure on my abdomen, a deep, unfamiliar tugging sensation. "She is bleeding from multiple sites." Suction. Now. Clamp. Her blood pressure is barely holding. Someone adjusted the line. "Get me another unit." The words drifted around me, muffled but sharp at the same time. I could not open my eyes. I could not speak, but I could feel. I could feel the frantic work happening inside my body. Pressure, movement, the strange awareness that my life was being negotiated second by people I had never met before today. There was another sudden alarm, a flat tone. My heart stuttered, then slowed. She is bradying down. Push, Epi, now. I felt a jolt through my chest like my heart had been punched from the inside. My body jerked slightly on the table even though I could not move on my own. Again. Another surge. Then the beeping resumed, weak but present. She is back. Continue the clamps. Watch the spleen. The room buzzed with determined chaos. Tools clinked. Suction roared. Commands fired rapidly back and forth. I drifted in the space between consciousness and complete nothingness, aware, yet detached. At one point, I sensed someone near my ear, a whisper from the anesthesiologist. You are fighting. Keep going. We are not losing you tonight. The operation stretched into something timeless. Every second carried the threat of slipping away again. At one point, the surgeon's voice rose with urgency. I am losing her. I need more visibility. Suction. Harder. Lights closer. Then another voice. Pressure is stabilizing. Barely, but it is holding. I floated in and out, unable to see the room, but feeling its intensity surrounding me. My body felt cold, strangely far away, as if I were watching something happening to someone else. A final surge of pressure, a sensation of something being sealed inside me, and the chaos slowly dulled. The alarms quieted, the voices lowered. Someone exhaled a long breath of relief. We got her. She is not out of danger yet, but she made it through the worst. I wanted to wake up to tell them thank you, to cry, to scream, to do anything other than drift in the heavy nothingness that held me. But my body sank deeper, instead falling gently into a dark, dreamless sleep as the world around me faded into silence. When consciousness finally clawed its way back to me, it arrived slowly like a tide, unsure if it should return to shore. At first, there was only darkness and a faint, rhythmic beeping somewhere in the distance. Then came the sensation of something gently pressing air into my lungs, not painfully, but mechanically, insistently, as if reminding my body how to breathe. My eyelids felt glued shut. My limbs were heavy weighted down by an exhaustion so deep I could barely comprehend it. I floated in that limbo for what felt like hours before my eyes finally fluttered open. A harsh white light blurred into view, then resolved into a dim hospital room illuminated by soft monitors and machinery humming quietly around me. The ceiling tiles were unfamiliar. A row of IV bags hung to my left, their tubes snaking into my arms. There was a monitor above me displaying jagged lines that pulsed with every weak beat of my heart. My throat felt raw, painfully dry. I tried to swallow and winced. A nurse noticed immediately. She appeared from the right side of the room like a warm presence emerging from a fog. Her name badge read Mila, and her face held a calm reassurance that I clung to instinctively. You are awake, she said gently. You are safe. Do not try to move too fast. You have been through major surgery. I blinked at her, trying to piece together fragments of memory. Pain, collapse, sirens, my kitchen floor. And then, nothing. My voice cracked when I tried to speak. Mila leaned closer, placing a small sponge soaked in water against my lips. Here, just let this moisten your mouth first. No talking yet. I nodded slightly, letting the cool water ease the terrible dryness in my throat. When she stepped aside to adjust something on the monitor, I lifted my hand slowly, shocked at how heavy it felt. The simple effort made my chest ache. Mila returned to my bedside. You gave everyone quite a scare. We were not sure if you would wake up today. Or at all. Her words settled on me like a weighted blanket. A tremor ran through my body as the truth began to sink in. I had almost died. Not hypothetically, not dramatically, literally. My gaze drifted around the room, searching for familiar faces, for the people who should have been there when I woke up. My heart clenched when I saw only empty chairs. I forced a whisper past my weak vocal cords. My family. Mila hesitated, and the pause told me everything before she spoke. "I am sorry," she said softly. "No one has come. Not yet." The air in my lungs suddenly felt too thin. I looked toward the door, half expecting someone to walk through at that exact moment, apologetic, frantic, regretful. But the door stayed closed. My chest tightened again, not from pain this time, but from something deeper. Something old and familiar. Disappointment. Mila observed my expression and gently touched my arm. "I want you to hear something important. You were minutes from dying when you arrived. Minutes. The team fought hard for you. You fought hard too. You are still here because you wanted to stay." Her voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the gravity of what she was telling me. The truth rang in my ears. I had been that close to being gone forever, while my family was busy smiling at cameras and drinking champagne. A tear slipped down the side of my face. I did not even feel it at first. Mila wiped it gently with a tissue. "Everything you are feeling is normal," she said. "You have been through trauma both physically and emotionally. Let yourself process it slowly." I wanted to ask her when my family would be notified, if they even knew I had survived the surgery, but the words turned to lead inside my throat. Mila seemed to understand anyway. "The hospital contacted them several times during the night, but no one answered," she explained quietly. "They left messages. No one has called back yet." Another tear escaped this one, hotter, heavier. It stung more than the IV needle in my arm. I closed my eyes, trying to gather pieces of myself that felt scattered across the room. Mila adjusted my blankets and dimmed the lights further. "You need rest," she said. "I will be right outside if you need anything." The room fell quiet except for the rhythmic beep of the monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen beside me. The contrast between that steady mechanical support and the absence of any human warmth from the people who should have been here cut deeper than any surgical incision. I tried to move my fingers again, flexing them slowly, reconnecting with the body that had fought so hard to stay alive. My abdomen throbbed with a deep soreness, but it was nothing like the agony before the surgery. It was a pain that meant I had survived. I stared at the door once more, imagining my mother's face, my father's voice, Vanessa's forced smile. I imagined them celebrating under bright lights while my body shut down alone on a cold kitchen floor. I imagined the missed calls, the ignored messages, the choice they made without hesitation. A shiver ran through me. I was alive, but something inside me had shifted permanently. The knowledge that my life meant so little to the people who were supposed to love me was a wound the surgeons could not stitch closed. As the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, a realization slowly settled over me with both weight and clarity. I was no longer afraid of dying. I was afraid of waking up to a life where the people around me could watch me disappear and still keep dancing. When Mila returned to check my vitals, she paused when she saw the look in my eyes. "What is it?" I swallowed, my voice barely audible. "I am done going back to people who never show up." She gave a small approving nod. "Good. That is the first step toward healing." I closed my eyes again, letting the sound of the machines guide my breathing. For the first time in my life, I realized I was not alone, because no one came. I was alone because I had finally stopped pretending the wrong people were the right ones. Late the next morning, long after the surgery team had finished their rounds, and Mila had helped me sit up a little higher in the bed, I heard footsteps approaching from the hallway. Not rushed or anxious, not the kind of footsteps belonging to people who had spent the night terrified for my life. These were slow, orderly, almost casual. My stomach tightened with something that was not pain. The door opened and my mother walked in first, holding her purse like she was entering a brunch reservation instead of an ICU room. Vanessa followed behind her in oversized sunglasses despite the dim lighting. My father trailed last, checking his phone as he stepped inside. None of them looked at me immediately. They looked around at the machines, the monitors, the IV poles, as if the room itself inconvenienced them. My mother finally turned toward the bed. Her expression, instead of relief or fear or remorse, was irritation sharpened into something almost performative. "Well, you certainly scared us," she said, placing a hand on her hip. "And you ruined Vanessa's night." The words hit harder than any physical pain I had felt since waking. I stared at her, waiting for some sign that she did not truly mean it, but she continued oblivious to the wound she had just deepened. They announced the silent auction results right after the hospital called. People were confused. It was embarrassing, honestly. Embarrassing. That was her word for the fact that her daughter had nearly bled to death alone. Vanessa pushed her sunglasses up so they rested on top of her head. Her makeup was flawless. Her hair perfectly curled, but there was a hardness behind her expression that made my chest tighten. Do you know how humiliating it was to get a call during my gala? Everyone thought something happened to Mom or Dad, but no, it was you. Again. As if my life-threatening emergency had been a deliberate attempt to sabotage her evening. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I felt Mila step quietly into the corner of the room, sensing the tension like a storm building. I forced my voice to steady, but the words still trembled. Why did none of you answer when I called? My father finally looked up from his phone, though only halfway. He let out a tired sigh. If it was serious, you should have been clear. A cold wave washed over me. I had been barely able to form words, and they blamed me for not articulating a medical emergency while my body collapsed from internal bleeding. Vanessa folded her arms. Honestly, you exaggerate. You have always exaggerated. Every little problem becomes a crisis with you. I stared at her, unable to believe what I was hearing. My hands shook not from weakness this time, but from something deeper, something raw. I almost died. My voice cracked on the last word. The room fell silent for a brief moment, heavy with the truth they all pretended not to notice. My mother exhaled sharply, her annoyance only growing. The doctors said you are stable now, so let us not dramatize this. I felt my heart break in a way that surgery could not fix. Mila stepped closer, placing a protective hand on the railing of my bed. Her voice was calm but firm. She was minutes from dying when she arrived. That seemed to land nowhere. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Whatever. You survived. Can we focus on how this affected all of us? The words hung in the air like smoke, suffocating and bitter. I had spent years convincing myself that maybe someday something would shift. That if I were hurt enough, scared enough, close enough to losing everything, they would show the kind of love I had always given but never received. Instead, they walked in with complaints, with irritation, with blame. I felt a strange numbness settle over me, as if my body were protecting itself from absorbing any more damage. My father finally pocketed his phone and stepped a little closer to the bed, though he kept a safe emotional distance. You make things harder than they need to be, he said. You could have handled this better. I closed my eyes to steady the shaking in my chest. How do you handle nearly dying better? I asked quietly. He did not answer. Vanessa huffed, crossing her arms tighter. You know people were staring at me all night after the announcement. My reputation matters. The gala was important. I wanted to scream, to tear out the IVs and push all of them out the door. Instead, I forced myself to speak through the rising ache in my throat. I needed you, and you were not there. My mother waved her hand dismissively. You always think everything is about you. You pick the worst times to fall apart. Mila stepped forward, unable to stay silent any longer. Falling apart. She nearly died on her kitchen floor because no one answered her calls. That is not falling apart. That is a medical emergency. My mother stiffened, glaring at Mila as though she had stepped out of line. But Mila did not flinch. Not even a little. Vanessa straightened her dress and sighed dramatically. Can we go now? We came. We saw you. You are alive. Great. I am exhausted. My gala was ruined. Ruined. That word echoed in my mind, overlapping the memory of me lying alone on the cold tile with my vision fading. I inhaled shakily, my voice barely above a whisper. Why did you come? The question seemed to catch them off guard. My father shrugged, his expression unreadable. Your aunt insisted we drop by. My mother nodded. And we need a statement eventually. People keep asking how you are. Of course, not because they cared, because they wanted control over the narrative. A story to protect their image. Nothing more. Something inside me cracked open, then not a sharp break, but a quiet, irreversible shift. A truth resurfaced that I had spent my whole life trying to bury. They did not come for me. They never had. They came because it was convenient, because it was expected, because not showing up would make them look bad. I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw strangers wearing the faces of people I had once desperately wanted to love me. My voice trembled as I spoke. You left me to die, and all you care about is a gala. Vanessa scoffed. My mother bristled. My father looked away, and I understood finally and painfully that their true colors had always been there. I had just been too hopeful to see them clearly. When the door finally closed behind my family, a heavy silence settled over the ICU room, so thick it felt almost physical. For the first few seconds, I simply stared at the empty space where they had been standing, trying to steady my breathing as the emotional blow radiated through me more painfully than the surgical incision in my abdomen. Their voices still echoed in my mind. You ruined Vanessa's night. You exaggerate. If it was serious, you should have been clear. Tiny shards of every moment I had ever dismissed, excused, or forgiven now rearranged themselves into a truth I could no longer ignore. They were not temporary lapses. They were not misunderstandings. They were not flaws softened by love. They were patterns, a system, a blueprint of how my family functioned. Vanessa mattered. I did not. Their needs mattered. My survival was secondary, maybe not even that. The realization felt like standing under a cold shower after stepping out of a burning building. Shocking, jarring, clarifying. I sank back into the pillows, letting the truth settle inside me with a strange steadiness that I had never felt before. It was not strength yet, but something that might grow into it. Mila slipped quietly back into the room, checking the monitors without speaking at first. When she finally looked at me, her eyes softened with the kind of compassion I had craved my entire life. How are you holding up? The question nearly broke me. Not because it was dramatic or emotional, but because it was the first time in a very long time someone had asked and actually meant it. I swallowed hard, blinking against the pressure behind my eyes. They did not care. They truly did not care. Mila nodded slowly, pulling a chair up beside my bed. The truth about people is never in their words. It is in what they do when you need them. Her voice was gentle but firm, grounding me. People show who they really are in emergencies. The statement hit me like a quiet revelation. Memories flickered through my mind like scenes from a film. The time I had a fever so high I hallucinated, but my mother still drove Vanessa to her dance rehearsal. The time I fell off my bike and scraped half my leg, but my father told me not to make a scene because Vanessa had a piano audition afterward. The time I got food poisoning on vacation, and Vanessa accused me of faking it to ruin her trip. Always dismissed, always minimized, always too much or not enough. I had spent years thinking if I just behaved better, asked for less, complained, less achieved, more. Maybe then they would treat me the way they treated her. But lying in that hospital bed, machines keeping my vitals steady, fresh stitches across my abdomen, the truth finally crystallized. It had never been about my worth. It had always been about their inability to recognize it. Mila squeezed my hand lightly, her expression soft but resolute. You deserve better than what they showed you today. Those words slipped into a part of me that had never been touched before. Not by family, not by friends, not even by teachers who once told me I had potential. I felt something shift deep inside, a small but definite click, as if a locked door I had pressed against for years had finally opened. I exhaled slowly, the breath shaky but freeing. I think I am done, I whispered. Done, chasing people who will never show up. Mila nodded as if she had been waiting for me to say it. That is the beginning of healing. The beeping of the monitors filled the quiet moment between us. I let my mind drift through the years of hurt I had tucked away in the corners of my memory, all the times I had convinced myself that being ignored was normal, acceptable, deserved. I had mistaken neglect for discipline. I had mistaken convenience for love. I had mistaken proximity for family. But the truth felt clearer now than ever. Blood may connect you, but behavior defines who your real family is. I looked out the small ICU window. Morning light filtered through warm and steady, casting thin golden lines across the floor. The world outside kept moving. People drove to work, walked their dogs, ordered coffee, kissed loved ones goodbye. Life was happening. And for the first time since waking up in the ICU, I realized mine could still happen too. Not with them. Not in the shadow of their superiority, their expectations, their emotional blindness. But somewhere else. Somewhere I had the power to choose who remained in my life and who no longer had that privilege. Mila began checking my IV again, but paused when she noticed my expression. "What are you thinking?" I took a breath, feeling a strange mix of grief and clarity settle into my bones. I spent so many years begging for crumbs of affection. I do not want crumbs anymore. Mila smiled softly. "Good. That is the first healthy thing you have said since waking up." I let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, weak but real. Then another realization slipped in, gentle and surprising. I almost died and they still did not come for me. And that is when Mila said something that would echo in my mind long after I left the ICU. Sometimes surviving shows you the truth you were never willing to see. And sometimes seeing that truth is what finally sets you free. I felt tears slide down my face again, but this time they were not born from hurt or fear. They were release. Grief leaving the body. Old wounds finally bleeding clean. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply for the first time, feeling each inhale settle into a new part of myself I had not known existed. A part that knew I deserved better. A part that was waking up at last. The morning after my family walked out of the ICU without a backward glance, the room felt strangely lighter, as if their absence had cleared the air, instead of contaminating it the way I once feared it would. I woke to the soft hum of machines and the faint scent of antiseptic, but for the first time since being admitted, I did not immediately reach for hope that someone from my family had shown up. I already knew they had not. And oddly accepting that truth created a quiet space inside me where something new could grow. The first person to step into that space was Rachel, my colleague from the school where I taught. She entered the ICU carrying a stack of cards drawn in crooked crayon lines by my students, each one filled with misshapen hearts and lopsided stick figures labeled with my name. I had not even known she was aware I was in the hospital. "When the front office told me you were here, I came right away," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "You have half the school praying for you." She set the cards on the bedside table and pulled a chair close to my bed. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, not because she said anything profound, but because she had shown up. She did not owe me anything. She had no obligation. Yet she was here. When she asked if I wanted her to read the cards, I nodded. She read them one by one. "Miss Harper, you are the best teacher ever. Please get better because you promised us a field trip. Miss Harper, I hope your tummy stops hurting. Miss Harper, we love you." With every innocent message, something tightened and then loosened in my chest. Affection without conditions. Care without questions. It felt foreign and beautiful. After she left, promising to return with more cards, I lay there absorbing the unexpected warmth of that visit. Later that afternoon, the man who had unknowingly saved my life stepped inside the room. His name was Samuel, the neighbor who had heard the crash in my kitchen and called 911. His face was lined with deep worry when he approached the foot of my bed, hat clutched in his hands. "I hope this is not a bad time," he said softly. "I wanted to check on you." I managed a weak smile. "You are the reason I am still alive." The words choked in my throat. "Thank you." He shook his head quickly. "No, ma'am. I should have checked sooner." When I heard the noise, something told me to knock, but I hesitated because I did not want to intrude. "I will never forgive myself for that." His voice cracked. I cannot explain the feeling that washed over me hearing someone express remorse for not helping fast enough when my own parents had not even bothered to show up after everything. I told him gently, "You saved my life. That is what matters." He nodded, eyes glassy, then placed a small potted plant on my windowsill. "I read somewhere that rooms with green things help people heal faster. I do not know if that is true, but it felt right to bring it. As he left the room, felt different again. Warmer, safer, connected. People I barely knew were stepping into the spaces my family had left empty, and for the first time in my life, I was letting myself receive what they offered. Later that evening, Mila came in as she usually did when her shift slowed down. She sat beside me and began braiding the frayed end of the blanket absent-mindedly, a habit I had grown oddly fond of. "How are you feeling tonight?" "Better, I think," I said. "Because of earlier." She smiled knowingly. "You are starting to see who your people might be." The phrase hung in the air for a long moment. My people. I had never used that expression before, without feeling like an outsider trying to force a belonging I had never actually earned. But now the words felt like a promise, a possibility, a soft unfolding of something new. I thought again of Rachel's trembling voice, of Samuel's heartfelt guilt, of the tiny plant soaking in the waning light on my windowsill. Mila rested her hand on mine. Family is bigger than blood. Do not forget that. The next morning, the chaplain of the hospital, a quiet man with silver hair and kind eyes, stopped by. I did not consider myself religious, but his presence had a calming steadiness to it. "Your nurse told me you have been through more than most people will ever understand," he said. "I just wanted to remind you that sometimes the people meant to catch us are not the ones we expect. Sometimes the net is made of strangers." I breathed deeply, letting the truth of that settle inside me. Over the next several days, as my strength returned slowly and painfully, more faces began appearing. One of my old students' parents brought homemade soup because she remembered I once complimented her cooking at a school event. Rachel returned each day after work, sometimes with flowers, sometimes just with silly school stories to make me laugh through the pain. Samuel stopped by again with a crossword puzzle book because he worried I would be bored. Even Tyler, a nursing assistant who barely knew me, started lingering during his rounds, telling me funny stories about growing up with 5 sisters. I did not realize it at the time, but piece by piece, moment by moment, visit by visit, something extraordinary was happening. A family was forming around me, not the one I had been born into, not the one who left me lying on my kitchen floor fighting for breath while they clinked champagne glasses at a gala, but a new one built on compassion, not obligation. One built on presence, not performance. One built on choice. Each small act of care stitched together the parts of me that had been torn open long before my abdomen ever was. It felt like stepping into sunlight after years of living under a cloud I had mistaken for normal. And as I lay in that hospital bed with the steady beep of the heart monitor beside me and the tiny green plant growing quietly in the corner of the room, I understood something with a clarity that felt almost like rebirth. Blood may define where you come from, but love defines where you belong. The day I finally decided to cut ties with my family did not come with a dramatic explosion or a sudden moment of rage. It arrived quietly, like a soft realization settling over me as the morning sun filled my hospital room with a brightness I had not felt in years. I woke to the warm beams filtering through the blinds, illuminating the cards from my students the plant Samuel brought and the neatly folded blanket Mila had smoothed beside my leg the night before. For the first time in my life, my room felt like a place where I belonged. Not because of who was supposed to care about me, but because of the people who actually did. My phone buzzed shortly after breakfast. At first, I thought it might be Rachel checking in, but when I saw my mother's name flash across the screen, my stomach clenched with the old familiar dread. I let it ring. I was not ready. I was not even sure I ever would be again. She left a voicemail. When I finally pressed play, her voice was clipped, irritated, the same tone she used when I forgot to bring extra napkins to family picnics. "You need to stop ignoring us. This is childish. We came to see you. The least you could do is show some gratitude." Gratitude. For what? For showing up late and blaming me for surviving. For worrying more about Vanessa's reputation than whether I lived through the night. For leaving the ICU because the situation was stressful for them. The voicemail ended with a sigh, the kind that always meant she was done being inconvenienced. "Call me back. You are making this harder than it needs to be." Harder for whom? I deleted the message. That action alone felt like lifting a weight I had been dragging behind me my entire life. Later that afternoon, another message came, this time from my aunt. "Your parents are devastated," she wrote. "Why are you making them suffer?" Suffer. The word pulsed in my head like an ache. I had almost died on my kitchen floor alone. I had nearly bled out while my family toasted champagne at a gala. And yet somehow in her mind, I was the one causing suffering. I responded by sending her a photo of my medical summary, the page describing internal bleeding emergency surgery and the attempts to contact my next of kin. There was no reply. Hours passed. The hospital quieted as evening approached. I stared at the ceiling, thinking about every moment in my childhood when I convinced myself that if I just tried harder, behaved better, succeeded more impressively, my family would finally love me the way they loved Vanessa. Maybe if I were less emotional, less sensitive, less me. But lying in that hospital bed, recovering from a night where I had hovered close to death, I realized the truth was never about me at all. They simply had no space in their hearts for someone who did not serve their image. I finally picked up my phone and opened our family group chat. I typed slowly, deliberately, each word chosen with the clarity of someone who had shed a lifelong fog. "I am recovering. The surgery was serious. The hospital tried to reach you 6 times. Your messages placing blame on me are hurtful and unacceptable. I need time and distance. Do not contact me again." I hit send. The message sat there glowing on the screen like the first clean breath after breaking to the surface of deep water. Within seconds, replies began flooding in. My mother sent a long, rambling text about how ungrateful I was, how dramatic I always had been, how she had done so much for me over the years. My father wrote that I was being emotional and unreasonable. Vanessa chimed in to say I had ruined her gala with all this unnecessary chaos. Every message was proof of exactly why I needed the distance I had just demanded. But then something unexpected happened. As the notifications kept appearing in a dizzying stream of blame, I noticed something inside me shift. I was not breaking. I was not curled up, shaking, sobbing, apologizing for things that were never my fault. Instead, I felt steadier with each incoming text. Their words could not reach me anymore. Not because they were kinder, but because I no longer believed the story they had always told about me. The story where I was the problem, the burden, the disappointment. In that moment, I knew the truth with absolute conviction. I was not leaving a family. I was escaping a pattern, and once that understanding settled in my heart, felt lighter than it had in years. When Mila entered for her nightly check, she noticed I looked different, brighter, more awake, ready to step out of something heavy. She asked gently, "Did something happen?" I showed her the messages, the long tirades, the guilt-tripping attempts to pull me back into a world where I never really fit. She read them silently, her expression softening with sadness. "I am sorry," she said. I shook my head. "Do not be." I finally said what I should have said years ago. She squeezed my hand. "I am proud of you." Those words hit deeper than I expected. They were simple, quiet, but they were the kind of affirmation I had waited my whole life to hear from people who never cared enough to give it. After she left, I stared out the window at the darkening sky. The city lights flickered in the distance, small but steady. I realized I had been dimming myself for years, shrinking, so my family would not accuse me of shining too brightly or needing too much. But now, with the ties finally cut and the weight finally lifted, I felt something I had not experienced in years. Hope. Not fragile hope. Not desperate hope. But the kind that grows in the absence of fear. That night I fell asleep not wondering whether my family would ever change, but wondering what my life might look like now that I finally had permission to change myself. The fallout did not begin with a headline or a viral post. It began with a whisper carried through the cracks of a community that adored appearances, but secretly thrived on exposed flaws. I learned about it 3 days after cutting contact when Rachel walked into my hospital room holding her phone the way someone holds something fragile. She hesitated at the edge of my bed before speaking. "I think you should see this," she said. A slow unease crawled up my spine. She handed me the phone. On the screen was a public Facebook post from someone named Andrea Mulligan, a known philanthropist who regularly attended high society events across the city. Her profile picture showed her in a floor-length silver gown smiling beneath chandeliers. Her post, however, was anything but glamorous. Last Saturday night, while attending Vanessa Harper's fundraising gala, I overheard multiple unanswered calls coming through from a hospital. I later learned that her sister was in critical condition, suffering internal bleeding. Not a single member of the Harper family left the event to check on her. If this is what family means to them, I question what values their charity claims to stand for. Underneath the post were thousands of reactions, comments, shares. My throat tightened. It spread fast, Rachel said softly. People are furious. Another update appeared below the post, shared from someone using an anonymous handle. It read, "I work at the hospital where the patient was brought in. Nurses attempted to reach her listed emergency contacts for hours. Not one family member answered. They were all at the gala. Reading it felt like standing outside my own life, viewing the truth from a stranger's vantage point. When the world saw it, it suddenly became more real, more undeniable, more exposed." I scrolled through the comments. People expressed disbelief, disgust, sympathy for me, outrage at my family's coldness. What broke my heart the most was how many wrote, "This happened to me too." My family ignored my medical emergency. I felt a sting of recognition for strangers I would never meet. Tragedy had tied us together in ways our families never had. I set the phone on my lap. My hands were trembling. Rachel placed hers gently over mine. "People needed to know," she said. "You did nothing wrong." I nodded, though my chest still felt tight. Not from guilt, but from the surreal enormity of it all. This was no longer a private wound. It was a public reckoning. By that afternoon, the story had spread across social media platforms. Hashtags appeared. Anonymous accounts began sharing clips from the gala showing my parents smiling, posing, laughing under the glow of chandeliers. A photo of Vanessa holding a champagne flute while the hospital number rang on her phone had been captured by someone standing behind her. She was mid-laugh. The caption someone added beneath it read, "Meanwhile, her sister was fighting for her life." I felt sick, not because the world finally saw who they were, but because they finally saw who they had been all along. By the next morning, local news stations had picked it up. Reporter voices filled living rooms across the city. Allegations have surfaced claiming the Harper family ignored repeated urgent calls from County General Hospital during their charity gala Saturday evening. The patient, later identified as their daughter and sister, was reportedly in critical condition. When asked for comment, the Harper family declined. Declined. How fitting. Declining was their specialty. Declining calls. Declining responsibility. Declining empathy. Meanwhile, hospital staff were forbidden from discussing the incident on record, but off record more details leaked. Someone confirmed the number of calls made. Someone else described the condition I arrived in. Someone mentioned how long my surgery lasted. A storm gathered and my family stood at its center with no shelter. That afternoon, Mila came in during her break, her phone buzzing nonstop. She glanced at the screen and raised her eyebrows. "Your family is not doing well," she murmured. I tried to ignore it, but the curiosity gnawed at me. Later that evening, when the hospital quieted, I finally searched their names online. It was worse than I imagined. Vanessa's charity sponsors had begun pulling out. One wrote publicly, "We cannot align ourselves with individuals who demonstrate such disregard for human life." My mother, known in her social circle for hosting brunches and charity teas, was quietly removed from several community boards. My father's volunteer organization released a statement acknowledging concern about his judgment. With every update, the same phrase echoed in my mind. Actions have consequences. But the part that surprised me most was what happened within my extended family. Screenshots of private texts leaked. Not mine, theirs. A cousin had been added to a Harper family group chat months before, and they had never noticed. Now the cousin released everything. Conversations about me being dramatic, comments about how I always created problems, Vanessa complaining that I was jealous of her success, my mother saying she hoped I would not ruin the gala, my father joking that I would probably fake an illness just to distract from Vanessa's event. The cruel irony of his words struck me like a blow. What they claimed I faked was the very thing that almost killed me. I felt my chest tighten again, not with sadness, but with a cold, final understanding. They had never cared. Not once. Not ever. Everything inside me that had once longed for their validation was now dissolving like salt in water. As the scandal deepened, messages poured into my inbox from strangers. Some shared their own stories. Some offered prayers. Some simply wanted me to know that I deserved better than what my family had given me. For years, I had asked myself if I was imagining the neglect, if I was too sensitive, too emotional, too needy. But now, the world saw the truth, and its collective voice drowned out the lies I had lived under for decades. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I felt a strange sense of justice settle around me. Not revenge, not satisfaction, just truth uncovered and undeniable. They had built their lives on a facade. The world had finally seen the cracks, and they were the ones who handed the hammer to the crowd. Returning home after being discharged felt like stepping into a version of my life that no longer fit me. My apartment was exactly as I had left it on the morning everything collapsed: dishes in the sink, a half-graded stack of essays on the table, a sweater tossed over the couch. Yet I was no longer the woman who lived in this space. I moved carefully, one hand on the wall, my muscles trembling from weeks of lying in a hospital bed. Every small task required effort, but strangely, effort no longer frightened me. It felt like rebuilding rather than surviving. The first thing I did was open the blinds. Sunlight poured into the living room, warm and unfiltered, landing across the floor like an invitation. I stood there for a long moment, letting it wash over me. Light had become symbolic in ways I could not explain. It felt like proof that life could continue even after being shattered. Over the next few days, I created a routine that anchored me. Slow mornings, herbal tea instead of coffee, short walks at sunset to rebuild strength, grading a few papers each afternoon to remind myself of the world I still belonged to. My body healed in increments, but my heart healed in unexpected leaps. What surprised me most was how rarely I thought about my family. Not because the pain was gone, but because thinking of them no longer defined me. They had become a chapter, not a cage. One afternoon, while resting on my balcony, I noticed the elderly man who lived across the hallway struggling to carry groceries up the stairs. I had seen him dozens of times, but had never exchanged more than polite nods. On instinct, I stepped inside, slipped on my shoes, and walked out to help him. He tried to insist he was fine, but I took a bag anyway. He smiled, relieved. "Thank you. These stairs feel steeper every year." That was how I officially met Jonas. He invited me inside for iced tea, and though I was tired, something in me said yes. His apartment smelled like old books and lemon polish. He showed me a framed photo of his late wife, a woman with bright eyes and a mischievous grin. "She passed 2 years ago," he said softly. "The loneliness settles in places I did not know I had." I nodded, understanding more than I expected. Grief takes shapes other people cannot see. He smiled at that, as if the truth in it soothed something old in him. Over the next several weeks, Jonas and I fell into an easy friendship. He told me stories about traveling the country in a rusty van during his youth, about his wife teaching him to dance in their tiny kitchen, about the way she always laughed before she cried. In return, I told him about teaching about the students who made my days brighter, and slowly, carefully, about the night I almost died. He listened without interruption or judgment. When I finished, he reached across the table and squeezed my hand with a quiet strength. "People who cannot love you in crisis do not deserve to love you in comfort," he said. "Sometimes the family we build later is the one that saves us." I felt tears slip down my cheeks, not from sadness, but from a kind of recognition I had never experienced. He was right, and he said it with the sincerity of someone who had lived the truth himself. With each passing week, I found myself craving the peace that came with small, ordinary moments. Watering the plant Samuel had given me became a ritual, almost a meditation. Grading papers became an affirmation that I was capable, valued, needed. Conversations with Rachel became a comfort. She came by often after work, carrying soup or muffins or simply news from the school. "Everyone misses you," she said once, sitting cross-legged on my floor. "Even the principal has been asking when you will return." I smiled, truly smiled. "Soon, I hope." The thought of returning to my classroom filled me with anticipation rather than dread. Teaching had always been my safe space, but now it felt like a bridge to a future I was shaping intentionally rather than inheriting by default. One evening, as I watched the sun sink behind the buildings, I realized I no longer checked my phone expecting messages from my family. I no longer wondered whether they would apologize or reach out or pretend nothing had happened. The silence between us had stopped feeling like abandonment and started feeling like protection. A turning point came when I ran into a neighbor in the hallway who had seen the online uproar about my family. She approached me cautiously as if unsure whether to speak. "I saw what happened," she said gently. "I am sorry for what you went through. People deserve better than that." I thanked her, and as I walked away, I realized something important. The shame I once carried no longer belonged to me. It belonged to them. Days slowly folded into one another, each one slightly brighter than the last. I attended a small book club Jonas invited me to. I began journaling. I took longer walks. I learned to cook meals that made my apartment smell like possibility. Without the weight of old expectations, I could finally breathe. One of the most meaningful moments came unexpectedly. A letter arrived in my mailbox from a hospital volunteer. She had witnessed everything the night I coded in surgery. She wrote, "You survived because you fought for your own life even when others did not. I hope you never forget that strength." I pressed the letter to my chest and felt something shift. I had been thinking of myself as a victim of my family's neglect, but her words made me see something I had not recognized. I had fought. My body had fought. My spirit had fought. I was not defined by abandonment. I was defined by survival. On a quiet Sunday morning, standing at my window with the light warming my shoulders, I realized that my life was taking shape in ways I had never imagined. Not in grand gestures, not in dramatic revelations, but in the soft accumulation of moments where I felt safe, valued, seen. A new life was forming, one built from the ground up with people who showed up without being asked, without needing a spotlight, without expecting anything in return. I was healing, not just physically, but wholly, and for the first time I was genuinely curious about what came next. The knock on my door came on a Wednesday afternoon, just as I was settling onto the couch with a cup of tea and a stack of essays to grade. The sound was sharp and insistent, nothing like the gentle taps Jonas used or the 2 quick knocks Rachel always gave. A heaviness spread across my chest even before I stood up. It was the kind of heaviness that comes from knowing exactly who is on the other side before you turn the knob. When I opened the door, my mother stood there in a fitted cream coat, her expression taut but rehearsed, as if she were preparing for an interview rather than a conversation with her own daughter. My father hovered just behind her, his jaw tight, his eyes avoiding mine. And Vanessa completed the trio wearing oversized sunglasses even though the hallway was dim. For a moment, none of us spoke. The silence pressed against the walls. Finally, my mother broke it with a strained smile. "We need to talk," she said. I did not move. "About what?" My father stepped forward slightly. "Can we come in?" "No." Vanessa removed her sunglasses and tucked them into her purse with a dramatic sigh, as if she were the aggrieved one. "This is serious," she said. "We would not be here otherwise." That part was true, though not in the way she meant. I stayed in the doorway, blocking their entrance. "Say what you came to say." My mother looked suddenly fragile, her voice dipping into a tone I remembered from childhood, the one she used when she wanted something important. "We want to fix things." And I almost laughed at the absurdity of the word want. Want implied desire for healing, not the desperation for damage control that radiated off them like heat. I kept my voice steady. "Fix what exactly?" Vanessa folded her arms. "The entire internet is making us look like monsters. The scandal has gotten out of control." Her voice shook with indignation rather than remorse. "This is ruining my brand. My sponsorship offers have dropped. One deal was canceled outright." She shot me a glare as if my survival had been an intentional sabotage of her career. My father cleared his throat. "We need the community to see that our family is intact, that we support each other." My mother nodded quickly. Public unity. A show of togetherness. We need photos interviews, something to counter the narrative. Something to counter the narrative. They had come to my door not for reconciliation, not for remorse, not for love. They had come for a photo, a performance, a prop. I stared at them, feeling a quiet anger rise in me with the steadiness of a tide. You want me to clean up your image? You want me to pretend everything is fine because your reputations are suffering? Vanessa stepped forward. You owe us this. I felt the words like a slap, not for their cruelty, but for their familiarity. I had spent years believing I owed them everything. My silence, my compliance, my contortions. Not anymore. I do not owe you anything I said. My mother's expression hardened, the warmth she attempted earlier evaporating. After everything we have done for you, she said, her voice sharp as glass, my mind filled with images. Me lying on the kitchen floor, gasping for breath while they toasted champagne. Me coding in the operating room. Me waking alone in the ICU. Everything you have done for me, I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness of the words. My father lifted his chin. You are being emotional. This is about being practical. Your sister's future is at stake. That was when the final piece clicked into place. Vanessa's engagement, the Henderson family, their fortune, their connections. They wanted me presentable, pliable, posed at her side. A smiling accessory, a restored daughter for the sake of a perfect photograph. No, I said quietly. The word was small but solid like a stone placed firmly in the earth. No, I will not help you. No, I will not pretend. No, I will not give you the narrative you want. Vanessa's face twisted. Do you understand what this will do to our family? Yes, I said. That is why I am saying no. My mother leaned in, her voice low and trembling with fury. People are calling us heartless, cruel, neglectful. This has humiliated us. And you think I should feel sorry for that? She blinked, taken aback, as if the idea had never occurred that I might not center their feelings. I stepped forward slightly enough that I could see each of their faces clearly. You left me to die. I said it plainly, not as an accusation, but as a fact that no spin could erase. You were laughing at a gala while my body was shutting down. You ignored 6 calls. You walked into the ICU and made my near death about your inconvenience. And now you want me to save your reputation. My father exhaled through his nose the way he always did when he felt cornered. You cannot keep punishing us forever. Punishment. Another word they misunderstood. I am not punishing you, I said. I am protecting myself. My mother's voice rose into a brittle breaking pitch. We are your family. Families forgive. I met her gaze without blinking. Families show up. The silence that followed was so complete it felt like the air had thickened. Vanessa's eyes glistened, but not with grief, with frustration. You are ruining everything, she said. You are ruining my wedding. There it was. The real wound, the real priority, the real Harper family creed. Image above empathy, perception above truth, performance above love. I took a slow breath. Get off my doorstep. My mother gasped. You cannot mean that. I closed the door, firmly, deliberately, finally. From the other side, voices rose in disbelief, pleading anger, then muffled arguing. But none of it pierced me. Instead, I felt a settling inside me, something like peace and power intertwined. For the first time in my life, I had chosen myself over them. And the world did not end. In fact, it felt like this was the moment my life truly began. The final confrontation did not happen on my doorstep, nor in some dramatic public space. It happened a week later on a quiet Sunday morning when the world outside felt still enough to hear my own thoughts. I had just returned from a short walk when I found 3 envelopes pushed under my apartment door. My mother's handwriting, my father's blocky script, Vanessa's looping signature style. I did not open them right away. Instead, I placed them on the coffee table and made tea, letting the steam curl into the air as I steadied myself. When I finally tore them open one by one, I found exactly what I expected. None of the letters were apologies. My mother's was a plea, disguised as a reprimand, insisting that family unity was essential for Vanessa's upcoming wedding and that my refusal had damaged the entire family. My father's note was pragmatic and cold, urging me to reconsider for the sake of a peaceful future. Vanessa's letter was the longest, filled with claims of betrayal, accusations that I was destroying her life, and even a sentimental paragraph about how sisters were supposed to stand by each other, though she offered no acknowledgement of the night I almost died. I reread the letters not because I needed clarity, but because I wanted to feel sure. And I did. Every word confirmed that they had not come for me. They had come for themselves. I placed the letters back on the table, feeling no desire to respond. The decision was final. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. That afternoon, as I walked down the hallway toward my mailbox, I heard hurried footsteps behind me. When I turned, my mother was there, breathless and frantic, as if she had run up all the stairs to reach me. "Wait, please wait," she said, grabbing my arm. I pulled it back sharply. "How did you get in the building?" "Someone let me in. I needed to talk to you face to face." She stared at me with eyes full of desperation, but not remorse. Never remorse. I kept my voice level. "You should leave. Not until you listen." She swallowed hard. "Your father is furious. Vanessa is devastated. Our relatives think this has gotten out of hand. You have to help us end this." "End what?" "The consequences you created." Her words sliced through the air like something metallic and sharp. I felt my pulse quicken. I created. That night, my mother continued wringing her hands. "You know how stressful gala events are. There were hundreds of people, hundreds of expectations. We assumed you were exaggerating. You always exaggerate." Something inside me snapped, not violently, but cleanly, like a rope pulled too tight for too long. My voice came out steady, almost quiet. I was bleeding internally. I collapsed on my kitchen floor. "I nearly died." Her expression flickered, wavering between annoyance and discomfort. "But you did not die. The doctors saved you. That should be what matters now. You survived. Let us move forward." That was when I understood something with perfect clarity. She did not see my survival as a miracle. She saw it as an inconvenience that would not go away. My father appeared at the end of the hallway, then walking toward us with stiff, determined strides. Vanessa trailed behind him, her mascara smudged her expression somewhere between outrage and panic. "We need to resolve this," he said. "Now." "There is nothing to resolve," I answered. "Yes, there is." Vanessa stepped forward, her voice breaking. "My reputation is ruined. Sponsors have backed out. The wedding press is pulling their coverage. People are calling me heartless. Do you know what that feels like?" I stared at her. "Do you?" She flinched as if she had been struck. "That night you called me dramatic," I said evenly. "I told you I was in the ER, and you said I always did this when something was about you." Her lower lip trembled. "That was different." "Different how?" "Because the gala was important. Because people were watching. Because your image mattered more than my life." My father exhaled loudly. "Enough. We are here to discuss solutions." "There are no solutions because I am not part of your problem anymore." Vanessa moved closer, tears streaking her cheeks. "Please, I need you at the wedding. People are expecting family photos. They already think we are fractured. They think we are cold. They think we abandoned you. You did abandon me." The hallway fell silent. Vanessa shook her head, crying harder. "We made a mistake. One mistake does not destroy a family." I felt a deep, tired ache inside me. It was not anger anymore. It was the weight of years pressing into a single truth. It was never just one mistake. It was every moment before that, every dismissal, every accusation, every time you made me smaller so you could feel bigger. My mother stepped forward, voice trembling. "Families forgive, families repair, families heal. Families show up," I said softly. "And you never did. Not when it mattered, not when it counted, not when I needed you." My father opened his mouth to argue, but I raised a hand, stopping him. "I am done. I am done explaining, done defending, done hoping. Vanessa sobbed, reaching for my arm. Please, please do not ruin this for us. I pulled away. I already ruined nothing. You did. You ruined it the night you let me die alone. My mother gasped, her face crumpling. You cannot shut us out like this. I met her eyes for the last time. Watch me. I turned and walked back to my apartment. They called after me, their voices echoing down the hallway with a mix of desperation and disbelief. But none of their words reached me. None of their pleas touched me. None of their tears changed anything. I closed my door, leaned against it, and inhaled deeply. For the first time in my life, the air felt clear, clean, mine. The final confrontation was not about proving they were wrong. It was about proving I no longer needed them to be right. And as the silence in my apartment settled around me, I realized something powerful. They had lost control over me. They had lost access to me. They had lost the right to define me. And I had gained myself. The consequences did not strike all at once. They unfolded slowly like a series of tremors leading to an inevitable collapse. At first, I only heard bits and pieces from neighbors or from the occasional message Rachel relayed after overhearing teachers gossiping in the break room. It started with Vanessa's wedding sponsors. The Henderson family, who had once championed her as a polished philanthropic figure, began reconsidering their public partnership. They had poured money and influence into her image, expecting glamour, stability, and appeal. What they got instead was a trending hashtag calling her heartless. When news leaked that her own sister nearly died alone on the floor and that the family continued dancing under chandelier lights, the public did what it does best. It dissected, debated, and judged. At first, Vanessa tried to spin it. She posted curated photos, inspirational captions, claims of misunderstanding. But the internet is not kind to those whose cruelty is captured in the open. Screenshots surfaced of her dismissive texts the night I collapsed. Someone leaked audio from the Gala where she was heard complaining that I always ruined everything. The comments turned vicious. Brands withdrew one by one. The Henderson family released a brief statement distancing themselves from any narrative of neglect. They did not cancel the wedding, but they moved it privately, quietly, without media coverage. That silence said everything. My father reacted by doing what he always did. When life turned upside down, he blamed everyone except himself. For years, he had been a respected volunteer at the local veteran organization coordinating events and representing the town at charity functions. But after the scandal complaints rolled in, members said they felt uncomfortable having him at public-facing events. A board member anonymously posted that a man who ignored his daughter's medical emergency should not represent a group dedicated to service and sacrifice. My father's volunteer privileges were suspended pending review. He was furious. According to neighbors, he stormed around to their backyard shouting about betrayal and exaggeration. He told anyone who would listen that I had orchestrated everything, that I was dramatic, that I had staged the backlash. But the world had already seen the truth, and his words no longer carried weight. My mother faced her own unraveling. She was part of the Women's Civic Circle, a respected community network that thrived on appearances of benevolence and moral leadership. The Gala incident led to a petition questioning her fitness to continue serving on the board. Several members pulled their donations from the upcoming charity luncheon, where she had been slated to give a speech about compassion. Compassion. The irony was almost cruel. She tried calling me again, leaving voicemails that swung wildly between pleading guilt-tripping and icy indignation. I listened to none of them. For the first time, her voice had no power over me. The most shocking fallout, however, came when Vanessa's business investors filed a formal complaint. They claimed that her public scandal had damaged their brand and that she had failed to uphold contractual obligations regarding her public image. A lawsuit followed. The glamorous empire she flaunted online began to crumble. The curated facade she had built with perfect lighting and expensive filters could not withstand the weight of reality. I learned all of this gradually, yet with each update I felt no triumph, no revenge-fueled satisfaction. Instead, I felt distance, a detachment that surprised me. It was not that I wished them well. It was simply that I no longer wished for anything from them at all. One afternoon, Jonas invited me over for coffee. His kitchen smelled like fresh cinnamon bread, and sunlight spilled through the window onto the checkered tablecloth. He had read the latest article about my sister and looked at me with gentle, steady eyes. "How are you feeling about it all?" I sat quietly for a moment, letting the warmth of the mug seep into my hands. "I do not know. For so long, I thought seeing them suffer would make me feel vindicated. But now I just feel free." Jonas nodded. "Freedom often comes disguised as indifference. It means you are no longer tangled in their chaos." His words settled into me like truth I had been circling but never named. The consequences they faced were not my doing. They were the natural result of years of neglect, cruelty, and shallow priorities. Their downfall was not a punishment I delivered. It was a path they walked themselves. A week later, as I was coming home from a doctor's appointment, I ran into my neighbor Anne in the lobby. She hurried toward me, phone in hand, her eyes wide. "Did you see this?" She held out her screen. A news headline glared back: "Local influencer's wedding partnership dissolved amid family neglect scandal." Below it was a photo of Vanessa wiping tears from her cheeks while stepping into a black SUV. I handed the phone back slowly. "Thank you," I said, though I felt no need to read further. Anne touched my arm gently. "I am just glad you are okay. Some families do not deserve the children they have." I walked to my apartment with her words echoing in my mind. That night, I sat on the couch wrapped in a soft blanket, listening to the quiet hum of the heater. I looked around my living room. The plant Samuel gave me the bookshelf. Jonas helped me anchor to the wall. The new curtains Rachel insisted I buy because they made the place look softer. Everything felt peaceful, grounded, mine. Their consequences were theirs. Their collapse belonged to them. Their disgrace was the life they had built brick by brick while convincing themselves they were standing on marble. I was not the architect of their downfall. I was simply no longer standing beneath the rubble with them, and that was the truest justice of all. The day I finally understood what healing felt like was not marked by any celebration or revelation. It happened quietly, as most real changes do. I was sitting on a park bench near my new apartment, watching sunlight scatter across the lake, while children chased each other on the grass. A gentle breeze moved through the trees. I breathed in deeply, feeling air fill my lungs without pain for the first time in months. That was when it struck me. I was not waiting for the next crisis. I was not bracing for the next criticism. I was not shrinking myself to make room for anyone else. I was simply here, alive, present, and unburdened. Life after trauma is not a straight line. It loops and bends. It surges and retreats. But somewhere along the way, the ground beneath me had stopped shaking. My life had become a place I wanted to return to, a place that felt safe. That safety came from the people who had stepped into the emptiness my family left behind. People like Jonas, who showed up with stories and warmth and small moments of humanity that stitched my heart back together. People like Rachel, who left flowers on my porch with a note that said, "I'm proud of you." People like Mila, who visited on her days off to check on my progress and remind me I had survived something extraordinary. One evening, I invited them all to my apartment for dinner. The table was unevenly set, the food slightly overcooked, the candles crooked, but the room glowed with laughter, comfort, and connection. It felt like breathing clean air after years in a sealed room. At one point, Jonas raised a glass. To new beginnings, he said, his voice warm and steady, and to the courage to walk away from what harms you. Everyone clinked their glasses, and I felt tears pricking my eyes. Not because I was sad, but because for the first time I understood that family was not defined by blood. It was defined by presence, by effort, by kindness, by truth. The world outside still buzzed with remnants of the scandal. Every so often, someone mentioned another consequence my parents or Vanessa had faced. But the updates barely stirred anything in me now. Their downfall no longer felt tied to my story. Their chaos no longer spilled into my life. I had closed that door completely, not out of vengeance, but out of necessity. Walking away was not abandonment. It was reclaiming my right to peace. Months later, on a rainy afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. The envelope was plain, the handwriting unfamiliar. Inside was a short note from one of the paramedics who had responded the night I nearly died. She had found my name through the hospital and wanted to tell me something important. "I have seen many families in crisis," she wrote. "Some stand by their loved ones. Some falter. Some flee. The night we found you, you fought for your life, even when no one else fought for you. I hope you never forget the strength you carried that night." I pressed the letter to my chest and felt the words settle into me like a second heartbeat. She was right. That night was not just the moment my family abandoned me. It was the moment I discovered something unshakable within myself. My life did not break on that kitchen floor. It began. I returned to teaching eventually. Walking into the classroom again was surreal. My students cheered when they saw me, their voices echoing off the walls. One girl ran up and hugged me tightly. "We missed you." The principal left a welcome back note on my desk. I felt whole in a way I had not felt in years. Teaching grounded me. It reminded me that I had purpose beyond the roles my family tried to impose. It gave me connection, meaning joy. It gave me a future. On the anniversary of the night I collapsed, I did something symbolic. I went back to the park, sat on the same bench, and watched the sunlight ripple across the lake once more. I held no anger, no grief, no longing, only gratitude for the life I had rebuilt and the people who had walked beside me. I whispered to myself almost like a prayer. They left me to die, but I chose to live. And choosing to live had become my quiet act of defiance, my quiet act of triumph. My quiet message to anyone who had ever been pushed aside, ignored, dismissed, or left behind. That is why I share this story now. Not for sympathy, not for drama, but for the person sitting somewhere in their own silence wondering if they matter, wondering if walking away makes them disloyal, wondering if their pain will ever become something other than a weight dragging them under. Here is what I learned. You are allowed to leave the people who harm you. You are allowed to choose peace over obligation. You are allowed to build a life from scratch, even if the world calls it selfish. You are allowed to honor the truth of what happened to you, and you are allowed to heal in your own time, in your own way, with your own chosen family. The night they left me to die will always be part of my story, but it is not the whole story. The whole story is the woman who rose from that floor. The whole story is the friends who held her up. The whole story is the life she built with open hands and steady breath. To anyone listening, especially those who needed to hear this, if someone could not show up when you needed them most, you are allowed to walk away. And when you do, you might discover that survival is not just staying alive. It is choosing the life you deserve. That choice is yours. It always has been. And now it is finally mine.